Hey guys, it's Lizzie. So recently I was replying to a comment on another video about systemic racism related to the NFL players kneeling or linking arms during the national anthem, and I wrote out a really long response, so I'm just gonna read it to you guys. Last summer there was a time where I wanted to make a really intense YouTube video talking about my thoughts on all of this, and I just didn't know how to do it in a way that was calm, and now I'm calm. I know a lot of conservatives hate the term systemic racism because it implies that people are intentionally being racist. That's not at all what I mean by this term. So if you hate the term, throw out the term. All I care about are these two political reforms that disproportionately affect people of color. So here we go. What we mean by systemic racism are injustices in the prison system or the entire criminal justice system, and in how we fund public education, so elementary to high school. Black Americans are 5 times more likely to be incarcerated than someone who is white. In some states, 10 times more likely. I'm all for enforcing our laws, but it needs to be done in a way that is equal regardless of race, and it's just not. Blacks, Hispanics, and it's the absolute worst for Native Americans, receive harsher punishments for committing the same exact crime as someone who is white. The war on drugs, started in the 1970s by President Nixon, created certain laws like 3 strikes, you're out, which means if you're convicted 3 times for any conviction, you'll be put in jail for life. During the Obama administration, a lot of this was undone, but previously there were a ton of people, mostly minorities, who were in prison for life because of being caught with marijuana. I personally don't do drugs. I think most of them are horrible. Marijuana just isn't. It's safer to do marijuana than to drink. Unless you're a teenager, and then marijuana will cause permanent brain damage, but if you're an adult and you're doing weed, it's way safer than drinking. But it just seems insane that people were put in jail for life. And again, heavily minorities. I know a lot of people personally in my life who have gone through dark periods and done drugs and even done things like stole property from a store. But then they've got out of that period of their life, completely changed, gone on to be a responsible citizen, been amazing friends, gotten a degree, held jobs, now are contributing to society. Doing drugs doesn't make you intrinsically dangerous, and most countries in Europe and in the world have moved towards a rehabilitation system when catching someone addicted to drugs. So instead of locking them away into jail for life, instead treating it as an addiction and helping them. Systemic racism means that blacks and other minorities are way more likely to be jailed for long periods of time for being caught doing drugs or for any nonviolent crime than someone who is white. Whites have this opioid epidemic going on right now, and President Trump a few months ago declared a state of emergency. We have a lot of cities who are setting up these antidotes on the street corners, so you see someone passed out about to die because they overdosed, you can call 911, go to the street corner on the pole, there'll be a code, you can get the antidote out of it and help the person, which is amazing. I'm so happy that we're treating this one drug as an addiction, as a problem where we need to help these people. But this is the inequality or the systemic racism. For a more white drug, we treat addiction as a medical problem. But for a racial minority group doing drugs, we treat them as criminals. And there's 2 types of cocaine. Whites tend to do one, blacks tend to do another. The charge for the type of cocaine that blacks do, way longer charge. We could go on for 30 minutes talking about incongruities and how this is. This is the most important part of the video. Once you have a conviction on your record, you have to report that every time you apply for a job. So it becomes very difficult to get work. Also, it makes you ineligible to receive government housing, and so this just keeps certain people in a cycle of poverty. Since 1973, 159 people on death row have been exonerated, meaning they are found to be actually innocent, didn't even commit the crime, but were about to be killed. They've been exonerated by independent nonprofits such as the Innocence Project. Again, these people who are on death row who didn't even commit the crimes disproportionately minorities over white people. I actually recently saw the founder of the Innocence Project speak at a law conference I went to, and they said there are even more people who they've done all the work based upon new DNA evidence. They've seen that these people are actually innocent, but since the case has already been closed, some state courts refuse to open up the cases again. This again is what I call systemic racism, because we are legally killing minorities who are innocent and didn't even commit these crimes. That makes me incredibly angry. I hope it makes everyone incredibly angry. If this has even happened once where someone was innocent and they were on death row and were killed, that's evil, that's horrible. Especially with our country's history of lynching, where there would be crowds of people showing up and cheering for someone to be killed, and then the fact that 100 years later, we're legally putting blacks on death row who did not commit the crime and refusing to open up these cases again. It just looks horrible. This is the darkest part of this video. There are more blacks in prison today than who were in slavery in the 1850s. The United States jails a higher percentage of our citizens than any country in the world, even North Korea or Saudi Arabia. Heavily minorities more than whites who are in prison proportionally, and much of this is for drug convictions and non-violent crimes. Again, I'm all for enforcing our laws, but with things like privatized prisons, states have an economic incentive to put more people in jail and fill quotas because they've actually signed these contracts to fill quotas, and they tend to do things like stop and frisk, where they will stop random people based upon their race. They will ask people to search their car, search their house when they don't even have a warrant, and these people are not legally required to let these people in. But a lot of people just don't know this because we don't teach this in school. We probably should. So then if a white guy was driving, the police wouldn't stop him for a random reason and wouldn't find the drugs in his car, and this person could just continue on in their life, not have a criminal conviction on their record, be able to get a job, etc. With a lot of the shootings of blacks that have happened recently, and notice I'm just now talking about this because this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is not the main problem in the criminal justice system. The prison system is the biggest problem. With a lot of the shootings of blacks that have happened recently, such as Trayvon Martin, Corey Jones, Walter Scott, the main issue is that the courts, with again mostly white jurors, are letting off these people who have killed blacks with no sentence. I think that a lot of people who do not like the Black Lives Matter movement have this impression that liberals are saying that all police officers are violent, all police officers are racist, and I don't think that at all. If anyone is saying that, they're wrong, and they need to stop stereotyping an entire group of people because of the actions of an extreme minority. But that's not the main problem. The main problem is that after we have video footage of a white cop shooting a black guy, the person is walking away free and innocent. That is the main problem. People feel like there's not justice that is happening. Something else I want to bring up. So a lot of people say that the black community has a violent culture and that the culture is the problem and is causing people to be more violent. That type of response makes me extremely uncomfortable because I try to view every culture, every race as equal. No culture and no group of people is superior to another one. And I think like 99.5% of people, I hope, agree that regardless of skin color, regardless of culture, we're all equal. We all have the same capacities emotionally, intellectually, economically, we're all equal. And so if that's the case, there's something horribly wrong going on if one group of people is committing more crimes, if one group of people is not excelling as much in school, in work. So if that's the case, why is our country set up in a way where certain groups of people succeed more than others? Now we're going on to the second part of this, the public education system. So in a richer neighborhood, the schools will be better funded, and in poorer neighborhoods, the teachers will not be paid as well, the schools will be run down, breaking apart, using trailers for additional classrooms, not enough supplies, cannot pay for heat during the winter, running out of paper to take tests. I'm not making this stuff up. I've seen it. I've lived in an area that had extreme poverty and extreme wealth in the same county, Palm Beach County in South Florida. And there were disparities between the white schools and the black schools. Yes, it's still heavily segregated. I think a lot of people don't see that. So my personal experience with this, when I was like 13, I didn't believe racism still existed. I had gone to middle school for a year in this city called Boca Raton, and it was a really nice school, a lot of white people, really rich area. Then for high school, I went to an arts high school called Dreyfus in West Palm Beach. And we didn't have a track at my school, so we had to run at this middle school nearby. And they had a lot of after school programs, so I just noticed that everyone was black at the school. And the track was completely run down. There were literally patches on the track that had concrete. It was insane. Everyone on our team kept getting shin splints. People would fall while doing hurdles and be bleeding, just fall in general and be bleeding because the track was so run down. Florida in general does not fund education very well because we don't have enough taxes. And even at my high school, which was pretty diverse, we would literally run out of paper and not be able to take tests someday because there wasn't enough funding. But this school, you know, we would go inside sometimes to use the restrooms or something, and I would just see it was so run down compared to my middle school that I'd gone to. I saw that it was still segregated. It seems like in some places we haven't changed that much from the separate but equal. Plessy v. Ferguson, the Supreme Court case, state-sponsored segregation in the 1890s. And so it's still going on in a lot of ways, and that's what I consider systemic racism. This doesn't even have to do with race necessarily, just in general inequality in our country. Just because someone grows up in a poor neighborhood shouldn't mean they have to attend a rundown school with 40 students in each class. Funding schools based upon property tax is causing that. A lot of people say, oh, it's not fair. If I pay more property tax, my kid should have a better school. If I can afford to pay 20 grand to send my kid to a private school, I shouldn't have to pay for public education. But that's the thing. Like, the starting point is already unequal. We're gonna have to all contribute into a giant pot of money and then equally spread that out so that there's the same amount of money per student regardless of what type of neighborhood they live in. If we want equality, we have to give the same amount of money per student in our public education system, or nothing is going to change. I think we also need additional federal funding. It made me really sad and upset when President Trump decided to send even more troops to Afghanistan. That's not going to work. The Soviet Union tried to fix that situation. We've been there. It's the longest war in American history. Nothing is changing. So we're putting all this money into a war that is pointless, when instead we could invest that money into our public education system and get rid of some inequality, actually invest in the children in our nation. The NFL players kneeling or linking arms during the national anthem should not make you more angry than everything I just explained. They are peacefully protesting to call attention to everything happening in their communities. Systemic racism, again, you can call it whatever you want. If you feel hurt by the term, you don't need to use it when you talk about it and when you think about it. You can literally just think our prison system and criminal justice system is super messed up. We need to change the way our public education system is funded. You know, like, you don't need to use the word systemic racism. Get rid of it if that is a problem for you. But these are real problems happening within our schools, within our criminal justice system, and we need to change these things politically. So someone had commented and they said it's disrespectful and disgusting what the NFL players were doing with kneeling and linking arms. And so what's even more disrespectful and disgraceful than someone kneeling during a national anthem is how Trayvon Martin was shot to death and the murderer got off. What's even more disrespectful and disgusting is how a Black American is 5 times more likely to be incarcerated than someone who is white. What's even more disrespectful and disgusting is that since 1973, 159 people were on death row going to be killed, but were actually innocent, and so many more who we probably don't even know about. The fact that we are convicting people on death row, heavily minorities, who are innocent, but then letting off horrible police officers who of course do not at all represent the majority. All of what I've been explaining in this video is disgusting and demeaning and disrespectful and needs to change. What's going on with the NFL thing is a chill, peaceful protest before a football game. If people kneeling or linking arms during the national anthem makes you more angry than Blacks being unjustly killed or jailed for crimes they didn't commit, or jailed for life for smoking marijuana, I think you need to reconsider your emotional reactions. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!